Good morning, this is Kris Shoemaker, also known as Yehudah ben Shomeyr, and you're listening to Coffee with Kris, the time of the day where we share a cup of coffee and share a bit of the Word of God. All right, this is our Tuesday portion, our third Sidra, our third Aliyah in this Torah portion for this week called Behar, which means on the mount, and we are in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 19 through 24. Have you ever been in a situation, and I'm sure you have, where you were treading into the unknown, and you literally had to put your full confidence and trust in another person because they were the only person who had gone through this before, or they're the only person that's in the know, and you're kind of in the dark? It could be a scary situation to have no control over your circumstances whatsoever, and to trust another individual with your life, with your circumstances. Well, this is exactly the situation God put the children of Israel in. Just like in the wilderness, during the 40-year wandering in the desert, they were totally dependent upon God for their food, for their clothing, and we see that God provided. It says that their clothes never wore out, their sandals never wore out, their feet didn't swell. God provided quail, God provided manna, bread from heaven, He provided water from the rock. In an impossible situation, He provided. So in a way, so as to remind the children of Israel of where they came from, He does the same thing in the land of Israel for every 50 years. And in this time of Jubilee, agricultural activity totally ceased, which the economy basically came to a grinding halt. And it was pretty scary because people are like, what the heck are we going to eat? We can't harvest, so what are we going to eat? What are we going to do? So this is what God says in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 19 through 24. The land will yield its fruit, and you may eat your fill and live there in safety. In other words, you're permitted to glean in order to supply your daily ration of food and your daily needs, but you couldn't go and harvest. You couldn't go and harvest. You were to allow the land to lie fallow, just to kind of wild growth on its own. And this wild growth came in two different forms. You know, when grain ripens and seeds fall to the ground, those seeds go into the ground, germinate, produce new shoots. This is new growth. Another practice was that after the harvest, they would leave the roots in the field, and new harvest would come from those old roots. So there were two different kinds of growth going on here. It says you can glean, but you can't harvest. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you may eat your fill and live there in safety. Now, if you ask, what are we going to eat during this seventh year? So we're talking about a sabbatical year and also the year of Jubilee. What are we going to eat during the seventh year if, see, we are not to sow nor to gather in our increase? If we're not to plant and harvest, what are we going to eat? Verse 21, now I will command my blessing to you in the sixth year. God says, I will make an overabundance in that particular year, so you'll have enough grain stored up so that you won't starve. This harkens back to the 40 years in the wilderness, wandering in the desert, where God provided manna for every single day of the week. And they weren't to save any of that daily manna till the next day, because it would rot and breed worms. However, a miracle occurred every week, because when they gathered it on Friday, they gathered in twice as much, and they were able to save it till the next day, and it wouldn't rot, it wouldn't breed worms. It was a double portion because they weren't to work on Sabbath. So during the sabbatical year, during the year of Jubilee, the same thing occurred. The year before, the year prior, God would bless with an extra increase so that there would be plenty to eat from during the year of Sabbath and during the Jubilee year. So now I will command my blessing to you in the sixth year, so that if you yield a harvest sufficient for 3 years, when you sow during the 8th year, you will still be eating the old store harvest until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. Now that's a bumper crop. That's a pretty big blessing right there. Moreover, the land is not to be sold permanently, because the land is mine. Now, you know, we say that the land belongs to the children of Israel, and it does, but in actuality, the way the Hebrew is worded, basically, the children of Israel are managers and tenants. They're leasing the land from God. The land ultimately belongs to God, but He has given it as a gift to the children of Israel for caretaking and for keeping. So moreover, the land is not to be sold permanently, because the land is mine, for you are sojourners with me. For any land you possess, you are to provide for redemption of that land. So this was a every 7 year, every 50 year lesson on total dependence and total trust on God, so that the children of Israel would never forget where they came from and remember how God provided for them during this 40 years while they wandered in the desert. And we can take a lesson from that as well. When we find ourselves in an impossible situation where we're kind of forced to depend and rely on God, that we will put our full trust in Him because of the past events that God has seen us through and the past provisions that God has provided for us. We know that God is a trustworthy, faithful, loving, merciful God, and He takes care of His own. So keep that in mind as you go throughout your day. Thanks so much for listening. Go out there and have a great day. Shalom and God bless.